Hey everyone, thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch News Update on Tuesday, November 28th. If you're watching the video, you see some new faces with us today. So I'm going to introduce both of them really quick. We've been talking about them and finally have them on here. So first, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Brittany Zonbrecker. Brittany, if you don't mind just jumping on, saying who you are, where you're domiciled at, what your job duties hold.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. So as Ashley said, my name is Brittany Zonbrecker. I am domiciled in the St. Landry office, and I have responsibilities with beef cattle and forages here in St. Landry, as well as Avoyelles, Evangeline, and Allen parishes. I just moved here in August, and previously I was working in Cameron Parish for the last 9 years.
Thank you, ma'am. And then Mr. Tripp Morgan, you can go ahead as well.
Hey everybody, my name is Tripp Morgan. I am domiciled in Union Parish, but my region is all of Northeast Louisiana, the 12 parish region that most of it's on the east side of the Ouachita River. And I've got western side is Union and part of Ouachita parishes, but I'm also doing beef and forage work. I'm taking the place of Jason Holmes, which everybody that knew him knows that's some mighty big shoes to fill. So I'm hanging in there and leaning on the team to help pull us through on this one. But I'm very excited to be a part of the team and looking forward to helping out all the producers in Northeast Louisiana.
Thank you both. No, we're excited to have y'all. And as I said, mentioned you previously several times. So it's good to finally have your faces on here. And we will be incorporating y'all into our full news updates moving forward. I was looking a while ago at the calendar, and we only have one more of these this calendar year before Christmas hits, which is kind of crazy. But I will go ahead and we'll continue with our regularly scheduled programming. And Vince, you can go ahead and do our updates for Central and South Louisiana.
Thank you, Ashley, and welcome aboard, Tripp and Brittany. It's always good to spread the wealth, if you would, or the knowledge and the expertise as we encounter different facets throughout our programming and the things that we encounter from producers. And that's been a great learning tool for me as an extension agent and also a cattle producer by the things that I witness out in the field, both good and bad. So. That's what we're here for, is to help educate people and better understand how to hopefully better educate people on how to either save money or make a few dollars without spending so much. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into our weather conditions and what we've been facing here in Central and South Louisiana. As Brittany mentioned, she comes to us from the very coastal regions of Louisiana and Cameron, Calcasieu Parish, and we both still have a lot of contacts and constituents there and friends from our work paths. And folks, it's still dry. We haven't had any rain to speak of. We've had enough rain probably in the last 10, 12 days to get our winter pastures up, and those are looking pretty good. But I was thinking back this morning and had one producer. I sat in the tire shop this morning. I had a flat tire first thing this morning, and he said, I can walk across my stock ponds this morning, still. And we're moving into December. We got some serious issues ahead of us if we don't get significant rains to recharge our surface water structures, our ponds, our bayous, our waterways, our lakes. Because when we know something, it's going to be May again, and if we don't get any kind of significant rainfall to recharge these systems, we're in a hell of a bind here shortly. A lot of people put out some fertilizer last week or late part of last week with anticipation of this rain that was forecasted yesterday on Sunday. We're recording a day in advance, so on Sunday we had anticipated rain and we got none. So they were calling for like 60-70% chance of rain with some measurable rainfall and got none. So I think on Thursday we have a 90% chance of rain with inch to inch and a third of expected accumulation. It'll be very, very interesting to see if we get any. So and then again, I think as we move into the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 3 more days of 50% chance of rain. And even a local forecast this morning that the meteorologist said we've had multiple chances of rain and we get none. So I'm just not sure how this is gonna play out, but we're still seeing, and I'm sure Lee will discuss this, we're still seeing big numbers of cattle making it to the stockyards. Last week there were no sales here locally because of the holiday, but we have some stocker sales coming up next week and the week after, moving into the holiday season. I just don't know where these cattle are going to go unless they're going out of state somewhere, but it's a real struggle. Likewise, myself and other producers were feeding liquid feed. Every time you turn around $400, $600, $800 a week, it doesn't take long to eat in your kitty, and with anticipation of having some winter forages to graze. Looking good, but not good enough. We need significant rain. Again, we talk about, bull breeding season. Bull breeding season's coming upon us. I know there were some breeding soundness exam educational programs that went on here locally. Get your bulls tested. There's been a lot of misconceptions or lack of conception from the spring and summer breeding season because of the drought and high temperatures. That's the one only safety net that we can hope for, is to get cows settled and bred. So I know, speaking from my experience, my fall calf crop is very, very, very short, and I suspect that I have some problems, but I haven't had my bulls checked yet. I'll do that shortly. So thinking about a January note that I got coming up, I don't know that I'm going to be able to make that note, but it is what it is. We'll work through it with the bank, and that's going to be the case with a lot of people. So just be mindful of the things that you can control. There's a lot of things we can't control. The weather is one of them. Feed hay sparingly. A lot of people are well into their hay stocks right now, and people are still scrambling for hay, believe it or not. But as we see that, we continue to see that, we're going to have more and more cattle make their way to the barns, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate where this thing is going to end up, but I think we're going to have very, very low cattle number herds when spring rolls around. But it's, people got to make those decisions and choices about how they're going to sustain what they have. And a lot of older producers will not get back in because they won't justify the bill to afford a breeding age female or a bred female at some point. So that's about all I have. It's pretty much status quo and mundane in the central part of the state, and the southern part of the state is just extra dry.
Thank you. And I know we say it over and over and over, but I'm going to emphasize, a couple of things he just said. One, we can't control the weather, but there are things that we can control. And we mentioned the BSE days, the breeding soundness exam days, and just having your bulls tested on the last news update. As Vince said, I'm just going to keep reiterating it. We're seeing effects from 2 months ago. So that's how that works. It takes 2 months to get a whole new set of sperm for those bulls. And so if the heat and everything 2 months ago, it was still hot, we're seeing those lasting effects, and we will. The only time it's too late to test your bulls is after the breeding season. So even if you're in the middle of it, if you didn't have them tested, go ahead and send them out, get them tested. Take the time to do that. If you did not preg check from your spring breeding, still do that. Cut down on your open cows. There's no reason to feed an open cow. She's not making you any money. This year that hurts even more than it normally does. So control the things that you can, and that helps mitigate and minimize some of the effects from the things that we cannot control. And he mentioned the ryegrass, and I feel like we're pretty fortunate. I'm sure Lee's going to talk about this here in just a second, but the ryegrass was looking really good at the Hill Farm. He and I were discussing moving some of our heifers out on that, hopefully in the next week or so. So with that, Lee, I'll go ahead and transition it over to you for our North Louisiana update.
Thank you, Ashley, and glad to be with you all here today. Say welcome to Tripp and Brittany. Very valuable additions to our team. Maybe they won't be as pessimistic as Vince and I. We're kind of on a broken record, it seems like, as far as pessimism goes. And once you listen to Vince and I for any length of time, it seems like you need to go to your counselor or something after one of our news updates. But I mean, like Vince was saying, you call it what you see it as you see it, don't sugarcoat it, and tell the good with the bad. And overall, 2023, price-wise, has been pretty good. Weather has been very bad. So just kind of call it as we see it and just move forward. And at the risk of sounding too pessimistic, I will say that the ryegrass is good right now. The winter forages do look very good across northern Louisiana. I hadn't traveled much in Tripp's part of the world, but I can tell you over northwest Louisiana, the ryegrass, the cereal rye, wheat, and so on and so forth. We're even starting to see some white clover start popping up in some places along the Red River Valley, and so that's a definite blessing for sure to be seeing some of that, knowing that it's on the horizon. The rainfall has been sporadic, but it sounds like we've been getting a touch more than what Vince and Brittany have down in their part of the world. But the last time we recorded a news update, I believe it was, I stated that we hadn't run any water. And other than some isolated areas like the Shreveport area, for example, got quite a bit of rainfall over the last month and a half. And so some producers over that way have been able to run a little water and get some water back into the stock ponds and into some creeks and bayous and places like that. Most of North Louisiana hadn't. It's still bone dry in the creek bottoms and in these stock ponds and so on and so forth. National Drought Monitor didn't show any change for us. No improvements, I don't believe, on that. Maybe some slight improvements here and there, but nothing widespread. So we do have it in the forecast. So we've got quite a big rain event, I believe, forecast for later on this week. But it's going to take, we don't get into drought overnight, and we don't get out of it overnight. So we just kind of hope that we will continue to get these regular rainfalls without the winter weather that can kind of plague us. Down around below freezing this morning across the I-20 corridor, and they're calling for it again tonight, and then we're going to go into a gradual warming trend, so to speak, of course, over the next 7-10 days. So that's always a good thing this time of year to get some warmth to grow those winter forages. A lot of hay being fed, folks. I mean, a ton of hay being fed. And I've talked to a lot of producers that have asked, kind of what my thoughts are as far as why so much hay is being fed. And I think I can sum it up just because of the poor pasture conditions going into the winter. Some of the cows were a little thin, a little lower on that body condition score, and frankly, they're needing a lot of hay at this time, going through a lot of liquid feed, a lot of molasses tubs. Those producers that are supplementing using rations, of course, cattle are very receptive to that as well. So those bills Vince alluded to for liquid feed, they're coming due for a lot of producers. And folks, I'll be honest with you, rolling into the cattle markets, the pessimism doesn't stop with the weather by any chance. I don't know how close y'all keep track of the cattle markets, but it has been an absolute rout in the last couple of trading days. As stated, we're recording this on a Monday for a release on a Tuesday. So past Friday, we just saw a complete rout of the feeder cattle futures and saw them take a little over $7 off the spot month on those contracts. And a lot of times it doesn't, these futures prices don't connect to the cash prices that we're able to realize. So the week hadn't been set yet. I'm sure by the time this is released, we'll see what the effects of this drop in futures is going to do to our cash cattle trade on these calves and yearlings and so on and so forth. But I've got the market report for you all that we try to compile to kind of give a sense of what's going on here in the state of Louisiana. Got fairly high confidence in this market. Got 5 of the 7 local auction barns have reported their figures. Now, as Vince said, we didn't have any sales last week due to the Thanksgiving holiday. All the barns were shut down. So I'm pulling from 2 weeks ago. So this will be for the week of November the 13th through the 17th. High correspondence on data, though. I'll give you what it shook out to be. On the 500 to 600 pound steers, averages of the prices was $1.01 per pound. Excuse me, $1.44 per pound, all the way up to $2.48 per pound. The 5 to 6 weight heifers, $1.38 to $2.19. Cull cows, 63 cents to $1.07. Cull bulls, 81 cents to $1.18. On the bred cows, as I've stated many times on this report, I don't report the bottom end of the averages on the bred cows because some of the mechanisms that the barns use, some of the software they use to publish their reports, it's not real clear. Some of them differentiate by the head and some don't. And so I only report the high side of it because naturally the high side of the prices reported for individual cows per head are going to be your bred cows. So the average of the highs on the bred cows was $1,870. Pairs range from $850 all the way up to $2,225. How about that per pair? So pretty good prices on these replacement cows, folks. It makes those news updates we recorded back about a month or two seem pretty cheap on these replacement cows. And so anyway, as far as what that lines up with the last time on the 5 to 6 weight steers, 15.9% higher than our last report. 5 to 6 weight heifers, 7.2% higher. Cull cows, 3.9% lower, and cull bulls, 1.48% lower. And I think if you'll remember right, go back in these news updates, there wasn't a lot of confidence in the data for our last news update on this market report. And I think that maybe that can be attributed to maybe some differences in prices, maybe not enough data on the prior market report. Folks, all this is what's happened in the past. This doesn't take anything into account what's been going on in the future since Friday. I talked to a producer just an hour ago. He's got some cattle he's weaned and was getting ready to pull the trigger and had been dragging feet and looked like he drug his feet slap into a mud puddle here. And it's a tough decision, and it's hard to forecast and say what the right decision is. Do you put more feed? Do you put more hay, more time in these cattle? Do you cut your losses and send them on to town knowing that you may be in for a bad time? I can't say what the decision would be. I sure would be hesitant to call a truck right now and send them on an untested market this week. I would sure want to see what kind of shakes out on the drop. Sometimes when we see these major routes in futures markets, the effects are much more pronounced on bigger markets. Think Oklahoma City, Missouri markets, places like that, than what they are locally in Louisiana. So jury's still out. I hope next time whenever we have a report, everything I'm saying will be for nothing, and I hope that this market will kind of right itself, so to speak. The thing about it is a drop, a major movement in the futures market, it does not change the complexity of the cattle business. And the simple fact is we're at the lowest point on our cow inventory since 1962, folks. And that doesn't get changed overnight. That has no bearing on what happens in technical trading on futures markets, folks. Plain and simple, we're just not seeing any signs of herd regrowth, rebuilding. You look at what some analysts say, and they keep trying to point towards it, but the data just, in my opinion, doesn't represent it. Sure doesn't in Louisiana, but it doesn't nationwide, in my opinion. Final thing, and I'll close with this, is I'm still getting a couple of calls trickled in, losses on acorn poisoning on cattle. So just kind of be careful if you got cattle that are grazing with oak trees present. In fact, I talked to a guy this morning that had a suspected case of it. So thankfully, hadn't heard of any perilla mint poisoning in the last few weeks. Didn't really see, I guess it was too dry to get a sure enough crop on it. But it sure seems like some of the oak trees really put out the acorns, and there may be a little bit of that going on. That being said, I'll turn it back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you. To add to some of what Lee said, as well as Vince, I've got two or three presentations coming up in December and January discussing the drought, the impact of the drought, resiliency that some producers are seeing, and just kind of the general outlook as we've been discussing on these as well. So I'm interested to hear from y'all, from the producers, what management practices did you already have in place that you think helped you kind of make it through the drought? What are some things that you wish you already had in place? Just general thoughts on your management, thoughts on what all's been going on this past year. Anything that you think that other producers should hear in preparation for years like this again in the future? I mean, hopefully it doesn't get this bad again anytime soon. But just in case, what do you wish you had known to plan for this? And what would you like to share with other producers? So if you don't mind, my contact information is always listed in the video and podcast descriptions for this. It's plastered all over the beef cattle site for us. So if you don't mind reaching out, if you're willing to share some of that information, I would love to hear it to be able to incorporate that into those presentations. The last thing that I have for y'all this week, just a reminder that this Friday, December 1st, is going to be the annual Louisiana Forage Conference that is at the State Evacuation Shelter in Alexandria. So we've mentioned it before, the registration fee is $25. I've got the link in the video and podcast description for that, or you can pay at the door. Lunch will be included. Some of the topics are soil carbon contract considerations, a roundtable discussion on private carbon purchasing companies, soil carbon management in Louisiana grazing systems, a producer panel on producing and using baleage. Dr. Marcelo Vidavato is going to talk about some of the beef cattle research studies that we've got going on here at the Dean Lee Station. We'll have general updates from different associations and groups throughout the state. We'll be introducing the new agents that we have throughout the state if you have not met those, and just general discussion. There'll be a few other topics in there, I'm sure. That again will be this Friday, December 1st from 8:30 to 1:30 at the evacuation shelter in Alexandria, and I'll put the registration link in the video and podcast description. As mentioned earlier, we do have one more news update for the year before we round out 2023, and so we will see y'all again in a couple of weeks.